Hello and welcome to the Blue Shadow Podcast. My name is Joey,
I am Dan.
and today we are going to talk about what we, as just two fans of PlayStation, are hoping to see out of the future of PlayStation. And this is kind of jump started by a few recent cancellations that have been announced, that being two live service games which were canceled. That's from Ben Studios, a open world military shooter game, and from Blue Point Games, a God of War live service game. I'll share
hmm
my
Before
feelings. But go ahead, go
oh,
ahead.
before we go any further, what is a live service game? Because I didn't know this before today.
A live service game is a game that is either free to play or isn't, that has sort of
hmm
like it's constantly updated, constant progression, really a constant opportunity for you to give the company that makes the game money is kind of the general consensus behind
Like
it.
Fortnite.
Like Fortnite, and there are obviously examples of successes that PlayStation a while ago under the leadership of the now retired Jim Ryan went through great lengths to get these studios to make live service games. This includes the Last of Us multiplayer. There was originally on the first Last of Us a multiplayer game called or mode called Factions. It was really fun. They were going to make one for the
hmm
second game, and that was recently canceled. There was a disaster of Concord that launched, and within like a week or two was pulled. The
hmm
PlayStation has had some success with Helldivers, which you love. Which I mean,
I
so
have,
like
but
these
that's
can be successful.
but I will say Helldivers was not a free to play game either, which I think there were a lot of bones there to start.
Hmm.
And after you bought the initial game, there was plenty of opportunity to progress. And I don't think that was the case with some of these other live service games, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I think we should start by kind of saying like I am a single player story game lover. That's why I
Mhm.
tend to flock to PlayStation because they make some of the best games in the business of that genre. Dan, you're not necessarily on the same wavelength. Tell us about your perspective.
So I am somebody who plays a lot of live service games, both free to play and not free to play. And I've one of the games that I played when it first came out and has since been canceled was X Defiant, a free to play first person shooter from Ubisoft, which was really kind of a lot of fun, but it kind of got repetitive. But overall, I really enjoyed it.
I've never heard of this.
But yeah, it's set up that all the Ubisoft titles are in the game. It's like a weird, I don't want to say Marvel Rivals, but all the Ubisoft games are in it. So you have The Division, you have Assassin's Creed,
They got Watch
you
Dogs in them?
have you have Watch Dogs, and you pick characters from the factions who have abilities that are appropriate for that faction. So it was pretty fun.
Interesting.
And again, it was free to play, but that also recently got shut down and they're shutting the servers down in March, I
And I,
think.
I think that's kind of the wave that is being taken is like the live service games that are successes really take hold,
hmm
like Marvel Rivals, like
Yeah.
Helldivers, like Fortnite, that kind of stuff. But I think the saturation point is very low. Like it doesn't take much. Like people can only play like full time live service games, like so many live service games full time. And I think that's evident. And I as a PlayStation fan, and I told you my thoughts on it, like the perspective that I bring into it.
Yeah.
I am disappointed, particularly with these two studios, and I can explain why shortly, but I'm disappointed that their energy was put towards this. It's not like they're closing the studios, but we could have had other games from these studios by this point. And I just am a little disheartened that that kind of, is where it's left off. What do you think about like putting these games? I will say Ben Studios, I really love them. They have produced the PS Vita Uncharted game Golden Abyss and a game called Days Gone that stars Sam Witwer. It's very, very fun. It's an open world like
Oh, I've
motorcycle
played
guy game. You played Days
oh, I've
Gone?
played Days Gone.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
I didn't beat. I didn't beat it, but I've played it.
That's a fun game. That was my
It,
pandemic game.
it was free on PlayStation, one of the free monthly games at one point.
Absolutely. If you haven't played it and you do have a PlayStation, I highly encourage it. So then Studios pitched a sequel. They were told no. Um, and then this is just what they've been working on. We could have got a Days Gone sequel that would have given them more money than an unreleased game. And then Blue Point
Hmm.
Games did, I believe they did the Demon Souls remake. So
They
like
did.
they could have been working on another remake. Like I don't know. I just think the choice to put these studios on a live service game was intriguing rather than taking an existing live service studio or making a new live service studio. I don't know. It just seemed a little wacky to me.
Well, it's tough because I feel like to your point that you mentioned earlier that PlayStation is known for these single player games, these immersive storylines. Do you think that's playing a role into it that they might be wanting to get back to their identity?
I do. I 100% think that's it. And I don't know how much you've noticed, but like there have been a very low number of PlayStation in-house studio exclusives released. Like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth last year was exclusive to PlayStation, but that's Square Enix. It's not a PlayStation studio. Astrobot was
Hmm.
there. I mean, we had Helldivers, but like previous years, like in 2020, I think they released Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, and that was shortly followed up by like, you know, I forget what Miles Morales was in there. It was
Hmm.
very they were firing on all cylinders, and I think the video games are taking longer to make and everything, but this shift I didn't think was a great idea. So, anything else you want to say before we shift to kind of like the few things that we specifically hope to see?
No, but I have a segue, so if you don't mind if I go first.
Take it over.
So one of the things that I'm not too sure about is the amount of one of my biggest gripes with PlayStation right now is the lack of dedication to the PlayStation 5. There are so many titles coming out that are still being handicapped by having to develop it for the PS4 as well.
I agree with that.
And I think PlayStation is finally starting to realize they need to cut the Band-Aid off
I will say,
because at this point
go ahead, go ahead. Sorry.
at this point the PlayStation 6 will be out and the PlayStation 5 will be really PlayStation 4.5.
I struggle with this one because I think at first they did it because of the lack of availability of the PS5. And this is not just the PS5. This has been happening at Xbox too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think PlayStation has had some, like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. The game itself
Mm-hmm.
relied on the technology of the PS5. So that was a very early release that was only for the PS5. But then you have things like Horizon Forbidden West, which is a game that would make someone buy a console, in my opinion. Also playing on
Mm-hmm.
PS4. God of War Ragnarok, I think, was on PS4. So I agree with what you're saying. It kind of does take the wind out of the PS5, specifically sale. But I do like at the same
And
time, I kind of like the PS4 being able to stay alive, but it's feeling kind of like a zombie at this point.
well, that's just it. PlayStation, when they made the PS4, they made a really good console that is still viable in today. And if you're not necessarily a diehard video game player, you might not go out and get the next gen because your PS4 is working fine, they hold up well, and it's still being supported. So if you're Sony, what do you do? It's it's tough.
And they are, like I said, kind of moving in that direction. Like Astrobot was a PS5 exclusive. I believe the like even third party games like Jedi Survivor, I think was only available on the PS5. Maybe retroactively they added to the PS4, but I do agree with that. And I think it kind of gets them into this state where they're like in limbo with the taking full advantage of the PS5.
Hmm.
Because games like,
I
are you familiar with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart? Like the
I'm not.
unique premise. So Ratchet and Clank games are fantastic. They're some of my favorite. But this game has like portals, and like you can kind of like think Doctor Strange type. You go through the portal,
Hmm.
and it's like immediately takes you to that area of the level. So like they use the computational power of the PS5 really well. Astrobot, you know how
Hmm.
that controller alone like takes
Yeah.
advantage of it. Like I don't know. I think I think they're moving in that direction, though. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I cut you off a little while ago. What were you going to say?
No, you're good. That that was my one of my main questions of where do we go from here? Because I've heard rumors that PlayStation 6 is gonna come be released in end of 2026. I don't know if
That
that's
seems early. I feel like they usually have about an 8 year life cycle. Now, don't get me wrong. We're getting
maybe.
dangerously close to that. I
Are we?
think so.
No, we're in year three.
It came out in 2020. It's 2025.
I didn't get my PS5 till 2022,
Well, that's on you.
and I got it. I got it very early on.
It came out in 2020.
Did it really? I thought it came out
Yeah,
in 2021.
I promise. Anyway,
Yeah,
m-
end of 2020. Yeah,
might
going
we
forward.
might we get to my first thing that I'd like to see?
Abs Absolutely.
I would love to see a Reliance. Kind of, this is kind of two in one. PlayStation, first and foremost, has a large number of iconic characters that are kind of sitting on the bench right now. If you've played Astrobot, it'll kind of walk you through all of those characters. And I think an executive has recently said something like they don't have enough intellectual property and they want more. But I think in reality, while still developing new things, which is essential, like Naughty Dog's next game is intergalactic, it's a totally new franchise, which I love. I think they can look back and revisit things, whether it's through remakes or sequels, taking something like a Sly Cooper, or if I don't say it, my wife will kill me, Jack and Daxter, and even something like the Infamous or Killzone games that are totally different genres, and
Hmm.
leaning into what they have rather than trying to pretend like they don't have something or spend all this time developing a live service game when Bluepoint, for example, which can do remakes really well, could have done like an Infamous 1 and 2 remaster or something.
Hmm.
What do you think about the
Yeah,
concept that concept?
it makes sense. I mean, it's the old adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And
And
like
it
you said, they have these heavy hitters that can be used if they're just if they take the step to do it.
hmm
And saying that, well, we don't have the IP to do it, that's not really a great excuse. I mean, I feel like they're trying to compete with the cross-platform games, the Call of Duties, the Fortnites at the moment, when they just need to stick to the PlayStation exclusives because they, like you said, they have so many
hmm
so much star power on the bench.
and I think like for me, for example, my favorite game series, Dan knows this, you guys like I might have said this before, I probably Uncharted is my favorite game series in the whole world. I absolutely love it. And I think the power of a game like that in today's day and age, and this is something that kind of the second part of what I was going to say with this like bullet point was we don't need to make every game a massive 100-hour open world game. I love that. I think there's totally a place for that. Like I'll take a Horizon Ghost of Tsushima where I have to check everything off the map. But we can supplement that with a 10-hour Uncharted adventure that's great.
Yeah,
It's got all these cool set pieces, but it doesn't take this long to make because it doesn't take this long to play.
right.
And
And you
I would
can
like to see that.
utilize, yeah, me too. And you can utilize, like you said, the powers of the PS5 to do so.
Yeah,
You
like
can
one
really
specific
exploit.
thing.
Hmm. It makes me kind of angry thinking about it now,
I,
where
I
we could go. And I think we're getting there.
I agree. They have a lot of games announced. Like I said, they just announced Intergalactic. We got the Wolverine game that Insomniac is working on. Kind of not so confirmed, but definitely coming. Spider-Man 3, another God of War.
Hmm.
I think Sony Santa Monica is also working on a new game. So like I think we're getting there, but I think that you can tell that a lot of their resources were spent on these ultimately canned live service games by the lack of things that are coming out.
Yes,
Um,
I agree. And
you ha
what,
Go ahead, go ahead.
so where do you think we go from here?
I
Like, do
think
you think this is a message almost?
I
to other
think
developers.
I think a few things have kind of rolled together here personally, and you can tell me what you think after I say it. I think it, them realizing live service isn't quite the direction to go, coupled with Astrobot getting so much praise, winning Game of the Year at the Game Awards. One of the Nintendo bosses said like they almost out Nintendo a Nintendo game like with this
Mhm.
incredible little game, both highlighting how much people love these PlayStation characters and the power of a nice little game. And I think all of that rolling together is going to ultimately take us to a place that's kind of more like what this ideal world is that we're talking about. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think they're finally taking the steps in the direction that they need to be going. And again, live service games are great. I'm a big fan of live service games. I play a lot of them. I play them on my PlayStation, play them on my phone. It's I really enjoy them.
They
But I
do have a
also
sense of like
appreciate,
energy that you can't get in a single player game.
right, and it's for me at least, it's fun to go play that for 25 minutes and do it and turn it off. But it has a use, and depending on how I'm feeling, I'd rather put the time into a story. As somebody who likes movies, put time into a story where I can get out something out of it and not just running around killing zombies for an hour and a half and then going to bed.
Hmm. And I think I really think that we're getting there. So, do you have anything else that you want to add to this concept? I agree
No,
with
I,
you that
I
I
think
think the
we've,
value in the story, there's value in these stories. They tell important lessons, and it leaves you with something lasting rather than like you said, running around and shooting things, which is always good. But
yes. Yeah, and there's a time and place for it. Um, and just looking ahead, one of the big titles coming up for PlayStation, that's one of the big titles of this year is going to be Grand Theft Auto 6. And do you think that plays a factor into this decision, knowing that we're going to get another big open world game that they likely can't compete with
I personally think that
coming out this year?
I think it's a happy accident that they don't have anything to necessarily compete. Like Ghost of Yotei, that's the Ghost of Tsushima sequel, is coming out this year.
Mhm.
But I think that's coming out, I think, a little earlier. I'm not sure. Hang on.
While you look that up, I'll kind of ramble for a second
Go ahead.
because when Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, that's going to be it for
I
the
mean,
year. Like
it's
that's
pretty much the game of the year, right?
with without it even being released, it's going to be the game of the year.
I agree with you.
Just based on the time they're putting into it and then the physics and everything.
And I'm not a GTA
It,
guy,
yeah,
but the
it's
value of it to the game world, I think, is enormous.
and they put a lot of time into it. And seeing what Rockstar did with Red Dead Redemption 2, while that might not get the online support that it really deserves, Rockstar, that a game where they found a happy medium with an open world but single player story because that's a phenomenal story.
I have not played that one myself, but I have heard of the value of it. I think you're right that every developer is kind of just clearing the way and letting it go. And I think that PlayStation just so happens to have a lighter schedule at this time, which works out for them. Um, I want to kind of
I
close out
agree.
with two things for you, Dan, and we can each give our answers to this. What game that PlayStation, their studios are developing are you most excited for? And what is an unannounced game that you hope could come in the future?
Ooh, it's a nice little two-parter.
How about I?
Um,
Do you want me to go
as
first so you have
I've
time to think about it,
not,
or are you
and
good?
if I'm stealing it, I'm good to go. I'm gonna
Have
sit.
at it. Have at it.
I mean, I'm really looking forward to, and I apologize if I'm stealing your game. Intergalactic, as
Yeah.
I've replayed The Last of Us because I started when I was 14. when it came out. I never got past the rain mission where they're going from Fedra right right when they find out that Ellie's immune. That's where
Hmm.
I stopped. I know. Really really bad. But again, I was 14. Give me a break. Um yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And then a PlayStation exclusive game that I want. Oof. When the Xbox One came out, there was a game called Rise, Son of Rome that came out. And it's about you're like a Roman centurion. And there was like it was very story based, and there was a small multiplayer element, which was you were fighting other players in the Colosseum.
That's
If
cool.
PlayStation could do something like that, I'd be very happy.
I feel like the people behind God of War could do something really cool like that. Like, I
I
could
think they
feel the
could. And it was
combat
such a
being like that.
unique game. Yeah, it was so unique at the time that I was that was the first game I bought when I got my Xbox One.
Wow, that's a fun fact.
It was so fun.
I think
I
that's
had
an
a great
interest.
time playing it. So,
You don't really see games
but
necessarily set in that era too often, so I think that would be definitely
no,
exciting.
they did it so well. Like, 'cause you started and then you would like go to Britain and
Sounds
you meet
awesome.
yeah, the quote wildlings. Oh my God, it was so fun. Then it just fell off. So
Oh
something
man,
like that is what I would, in an ideal world, would be. Because it was very single player based, very story driven.
love it.
How about you? What's the game you?
So yeah, my but you are correct that my answer is in fact Intergalactic. That is a game I've been waiting for so long. It's been in development for 5 years. I am beyond ready for it. I, you know, I, I have strong attachment to Naughty Dog for not just Last of Us and Uncharted, but also Jack and Daxter. They created Crash Bandicoot. Like everything they do, in my opinion, is just so good and of the highest quality. So I'm really looking forward to that game. And the gameplay with that sword element looks really nifty.
Mhm.
And the game that I would want, this is self-serving and based on the stuff that I've already said, you can probably imagine that this is coming, but I would love, and I'm not going to spoil the end of Uncharted because I want us to do something where like we play it and talk about it, but a follow-up to Uncharted 4 would be, it doesn't have to be by Naughty Dog. I think there are plenty of other studios like Ben, for example, that have done Nathan Drake before and, could take the Uncharted franchise and let it carry on. That is something I want another
Mhm.
Uncharted game. Who's surprised at my
Ooh,
answers?
not me, but
And once
I
again,
think
my
it'd be very
wife would
cool.
say, if she was here on the podcast, she would say, "I want Jack and Daxter rebooted." And on that note, do you have anything else to add, Dan?
No, I'm very excited to see the direction they're going, and I'm excited to spend more money on PlayStation.
Me too, sir. But with that, we thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. Please consider giving us a subscription or a like or review, comment on YouTube or the podcast platform of your choice. And please consider giving us a follow on Twitter or X at Blue Shadow Pod or on Instagram at Blue Shadow Podcast. With that, we thank you so much for listening and we will see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you.